Hello everyone, welcome back to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. Really good to be hanging out with you today, and we haven't been together of course for a couple of weeks, so I hope you've been well and healthy and safe and all of those things. We had here in Australia we celebrate the Easter long weekend, if you will, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So last week was Easter Monday, so we didn't hang out, but we're back, which is good. But I do need to tell you, I'm still not 100% vocally. For those of you who regularly tune in, and I can see Mackenzie and Kelly and Ashley, names that regularly chime in for the show. And hello to names that I'm not familiar with. I can see Siamara and Ash, names that I don't always see. Matt's just jumped in. So for those of you who know, I've been quite unwell. Just the common cold/flu, but the common cold/flu really knocked it out of me, and really left me with a really fatigued voice because it had this lingering cough. And in fact, today, what I might do, I can see Linda jumping in. Well, I think we can always forgive Linda for being, if she runs late, that's completely fine, given the amount of energy and effort she puts into the show. Linda, of course, is our fantastic moderator in the live chat. So good to have you on board, Linda, as always. And so yeah, I might take a moment today, just before we start the Q&A, to talk you through how I've been trying to remediate my voice, and some of the complications I've kind of met along the way, because I think, it's all too easy, isn't it, to here on the channel, and you always see me in perfect well, you don't actually always see me in perfect vocal health. I try to be as authentic as possible, but when you watch my pre-recorded videos, you'll always see me in relative vocal health, because that's what it takes to do the videos. And so it can be all too easy then to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, Dr. Dan, he just, is always smooth sailing with his voice, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's just that, whenever I do the pre-record videos, I am in perfect vocal health or reasonable vocal health. And case in point, last week, when I usually have 1 week off between my terms, I teach my calendar year in quarters, what we in Australia refer to as school terms, and they're generally 10 to 11 weeks in length. But between those 10 to 11 week length terms or quarters, I always take a week off from teaching so that I can pre-record all of my pre-record videos for the channel for you to watch. Which means that in the previous term, I've been writing all my scripts and getting them all ready, doing the research, ready to do the videos for you. And so there's a lot riding on that week as far as getting the work done. And the challenge then is, if I then hit that week like I did last week, and if I'm not in good vocal health, then that can cause a problem. So what as you know from 2 weeks ago, we did a shorter Q&A, and today might be not dissimilar. I'm a lot better than I was 2 weeks ago, but I'm still not great, evidenced by the story I'm about to tell. So I had been trying to get my voice back into a semblance of health and readiness to do what is ultimately 2 days, sometimes up to 3 days of recording the videos, which means that I'm talking, just constantly talking to video. And I wish I was a one-take wonder, but I am not. So you know, one video, you know, you might see 8 minutes of me talking. To do that one video can mean up to 40 minutes of talking, because, you know, having to do retakes and what have you. So as you might expect, that can be quite laborsome for the voice. So I got to the end of day one, and I looked ahead into what I'd prepared to record the next day, and realized, you know what, my voice my voice cannot do what I've planned to do in the second or the third day. And so I actually had to make the decision to not record. Now, all things going well, it will not affect my, you know, usual flow of 2 or 3 pre-record videos a month. So they'll keep coming out. I'm ahead enough that will be okay. But it was, you know, when this was happening, it was quite stressful, because it meant I had to then change my my diary and all those things, and it really reminded me, you know, of the stress that can come with not having a voice that is in perfect health for when you are performing. And so many of you have had that experience. So let me tell you what I had done to get my voice to, at least I was able to do one day of recording. I must admit, on Wednesday this week, I'm going to be starting to edit the videos that I did get done, and I'm a bit nervous about reviewing those, because maybe it'll be interesting to see what the quality of them is from a vocal presentation point of view, simply because I just wasn't in good voice. So what I had done to try and get my voice into a semblance of health is I'd recognize, firstly, okay, what is going on for me vocally? I'm no longer sick. So the thing that kicked it all off was I had a really bad bout of rhinovirus back about 4 or 5 weeks. It laid me out. I was out I spent 4 days in bed. Probably should have spent a bit longer, but did start to teach online again for a few days and sort of got back into it. But the lasting effect of that was a lingering cough, something that I'm continuing to try and manage. I've heard ear, nose and throat doctors refer to this lingering cough as the 30-day cough. And it's something that many of us have experienced post, you know, cold and flu, upper respiratory tract infections. And you might be wondering, well, what is that? Fortunately, I had the knowledge to know what that actually is. And the 30-day cough is really just the label given to the lasting agitation and inflamed arytenoid cartilage. So let me just quickly grab Lenny here. So here's Lenny. This is Lenny the larynx. So this is looking at it from behind. This is the posterior view. And these 2 pieces of cartilage here, these are your arytenoids or arytenoids, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it. And the membrane that covers this, and there's muscles and whatever in there, it becomes, when you've been sick and had the flu, and as a part of that, typically there's coughing or constant clearing of phlegm or disgusting things like this. This area becomes inflamed. It edemas, and you will get swelling, and as a result gets agitated. And the reason we have a lasting impact, where am I going to put Lenny? The reason we then, so you get better, your body fights off the common cold, common flu, you heal up, but you're left with this lingering cough. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is that agitation we naturally regurgitate after every meal. You may or may not know that. Now, some people regurgitate more than others. We're all so different. And that natural regurgitation brings with it some acid. Now, some of us experience that to the level of heartburn, indigestion, and can be have to the level of LPR, laryngeal pharyngeal reflux disorder, Singer's reflux or silent reflux, it's also known as, and that continuing reflux just continues to agitate and inflame the rear of the voice, to which point that these just continue to be agitated to the point where they'll almost agitate and flutter and actually go into a spasm, which causes an ongoing cough. And so one of the ways what we've got to address there is, so I'm no longer sick, but I've still got to address the actual issue at hand, and that is the inflammation that's causing the cough, because you've just got this vicious cycle, right? If you're continuing to cough, then you're continuing to agitate and inflame, and then you get the reflux. And so actually, one of the ways to deal with, and this is certainly what I've found helpful, and I have been personally instructed by an ear, nose and throat doctor to try, is I use, in those moments, I do a number of things. Firstly, I make sure my hydration is high. So I'm really making sure that the internals of my vocal tract can be constantly hydrated and appropriately, got good hydration levels. And you've 2 to 3 liters a day, sipping it through the day. Hydration, we've talked about it so many times together on the channel, so we won't go into that today, but it is number one. Number two, I'm being very careful about what I eat, because what typically wouldn't cause me any reflux is likely now to, just because it's already inflamed, I've got to be really careful. In fact, I decided not to have any lunch before coming on to do today's show, simply because I knew it would almost certainly aggravate some reflux, which would then cause me to get that little flutter, and away we go. We got the coughing going on. So I'm being I'm hydrating, being very careful around what I eat. I'm trying to reduce my vocal load so that I'm, like we'll do today and like we did a couple of weeks ago, reduce the amount of talking I'm doing. Had to make the decision to not continue to place the voice under load for day 2 and day 3 of my video shoot last week. But also, I did 3 things. I steamed. So I have a personal vapor inhaler, which I did a bit of steaming. I only did that once I felt confident that I was fully better, that I wasn't carrying, that my body had successfully fought off the flu, and that I wasn't going to be encouraging any ongoing flu symptoms. So it was a couple of weeks after I'd got better that I started to use the vapor inhaler. The second thing I did, I started to do straw phonation. We've talked about straw phonation here so many times. So the reason I was doing the straw phonation is to encourage that massaging of the vocal folds, in which and that therefore, which is also encouraging a reduction in that inflammation. So I'm encouraging the moving on of that inflammation and trying to get the vocal folds back to a health line, which is really positive. The other thing that I did, which I find very effective, and I've just seen Evo's super chat. Thank you very much, Evo. We'll get to your super chat in a sec. the other thing I find very effective is I use, and this is in part because I already know I struggle with reflux and LPR specifically. I use an over-the-counter antacid called Gaviscon. Now, and I use the double active one. I find it really helpful because when you drink the antacid, so I'm not using the tablets, this is the liquid form of the, then you can buy this at any grocery store here in Australia. That not only does it help to subdue the reflux, but it also has a really positive coating of the vocal tract. So it gives me a sensory relief, as well as helping to reduce the reflux. And I find that, and I've been finding that by taking that, not after, I haven't been incredibly disciplined in taking it after every meal, but I take it after my at least 2 meals a day. And I've done that for the last 4 or 5 days, maybe a little bit longer. And I'm slowly but surely noticing a reduction in my involuntary need to cough, which is bringing it far more back into the realm where I can manage it with a swallow, because we don't want to get into the habit of clearing, and we certainly don't want to be coughing, because it then really constantly, hits us up and causes that reaction. And that's how I've been dealing with my 30-day cough. In my line of work, really important that I get on top of it, because I'm spending my entire day singing and talking with students. And so I thought I'd share that with you, give you some insight into, what I am doing myself to deal with my own vocal health. And you might like to try it yourself. And there is no, you would always read the label on it, something like a Gaviscon, but it is over the counter. I have talked with a gastroenterologist about a product like Gaviscon, and my gastroenterologist friend sung its praises for many reasons, and we talked about the impact on the vocal tract and as well. So there you go. I think you could certainly try that with a sense of safety and see how it goes for you. If it doesn't work, that's okay. The other things are certainly something that you should be looking at: hydration, reduction of vocal load, vapor inhaling, and straw phonation. All of those, I think you'll find beneficial for your general vocal health. And Carl Barger's just said, I need to try that. You can certainly give it a try and maybe jump on and let us know in future weeks how you find that. Now, talking of future weeks, next week we've got Kerry Ho. Now, many of you will be familiar with Kerry. Kerry is a YouTuber, a fellow Aussie YouTuber. She's from Melbourne, and we've got Kerry on the show next week. I'm really excited to have Kerry. Do you know, here's a little secret. Kerry, when I first started to explore, and this is going back 4 or 5 years, when I first started to explore the idea of doing YouTube or putting videos onto YouTube, and I was just sort of doing some reconnaissance and what is this YouTube thing all about, Kerry was one of those YouTubers who I initially came into contact with. And do you know what I loved about Kerry's on-camera persona was just the joy and the encouraging sort of nature of the way she positioned herself towards us all as singers. And I just know Kerry's going to bring that to our video, our interview next week. So if you don't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the white bell icon so that you get reminded about next week's live show. Of course, we do these live shows here at Voice Essentials every Monday at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So anyway, next week, Kerry's coming on. While I'm talking about it, we've got some other guests coming up. I've got Nadine Mannion coming up. Now, she's going to be talking in a few weeks. This might be a topic that's of interest to you. We're going to be talking about transgender voice and the issues around that. Now, this might not personally be applicable to you, but I want to encourage you to come on. You're going to learn quite a bit of stuff, I'd say, about the voice and the anatomy of the voice in that discussion. So I encourage you to tune in when Nadine comes on. She'll be on the 17th of May. And then I've got a speech pathologist coming on, Samantha Urin. Do you know what? It's the next three guests I've got coming on are all Aussies. It gives me such great pleasure to have my Aussie colleagues come onto the show. Samantha's fantastic. She's going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about a lot of things about vocal health, but she wants to talk about a lot of the myths that we come into contact with vocal health. So we're going to talk about that sort of stuff. She's on the 31st of May. So many cool things coming up. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and you know, check out those live guests when they come on. I just want to, before we get into the questions today, Evo's Evo's put a super chat in here. Vegemite super chat for Vegemite lozenges or whatever works over there. Doc, I hope you get back. To my knowledge, Evo, we do not have Vegemite lozenge. Actually, sucking on Vegemite. Yeah, even as an Aussie, I don't think I could go there. I do like Vegemite in certain circumstances. As a lozenge, I don't think so. My fellow Aussies, Linda, let me know. Have you ever heard of a Vegemite lozenge? I don't think so. Anywho, we need to get on with our show and get into answering your questions, which we are going to do right after this. Okay, let me grab myself some water here. Now, Mackenzie, who is a long-time watcher, long-time asker of questions, Mackenzie has asked earlier, Dr. Dan, it has recently been pointed out to me that I have developed a bad habit of too much vocal fry or glottal attacks when I sing. How do I break this habit, and how do I develop a cleaner onset? I've been doing the YA simultaneous onset exercise as a part of VE1, but how do I use simultaneous onset while singing an actual song? Mackenzie, so firstly, you are right in identifying that we do always I always orientate my students to a simultaneous or balanced onset as a neutral habitual point. The reason we do that is that a simultaneous onset, balanced, and you'll hear me refer to it, it's the same thing, is because it's far more sustainable, it's more efficient for the voice, and you know, over a period of time, it doesn't fatigue the voice anywhere near as much. Now, there are other onsets. So we have hard, I'm not going to give the examples today because, because of my vocal health. And I'll explain that point in a moment. Hard, soft, creaky, and pressed. So there are, and some people even go as far as identifying some others. In the Voice Essentials online singing program or developmental pathway, we look at the 5 of them. So balanced, hard, soft, creaky, and pressed. And we then also look at offsets. So onsets are the way your vocal folds commence phonation. Offsets is the way your vocal folds will discontinue. Your voice will discontinue phonation. And so with balanced, it's the most efficient. But if all we ever did was do a balanced phonation, our singing would be rather lackluster as contemporary vocalists. Now, in classical singing, you're almost always going to hear a balanced onset, because in classical discipline, from an artistry point of view, that's what it needs to be. But in contemporary voice, we need to draw on the options of other onsets and offsets to create color and texture and to express certain levels of emotion and types of emotion. But if we find ourselves starting to habitually create, for example, a hard onset, which you'll hear hard onsets used a lot in rock, you'll hear creaky used a lot in pop, you'll hear breathy offsets used a lot in you'll hear it in jazz. So often it's genre specific as well. But if you're suddenly in the habit where the voice will only do that non-balanced onset offset, then we start to get into a place where the voice can be in a sort of place of wear and tear. So the rule, if we were looking for a rule around this in contemporary voice, is that if you cannot make the choice to not do that creaky onset or hard onset or soft onset, then that's where we've got some concerns. We always want as the singer, we always want to be in control. We want to be able to make the decisions. We don't want the voice to be making the decisions, if I can make that distinction. And so you've got to always make sure that you can make the choice to turn any which onset on or off. The moment you can't, that's where we would find ourselves in some concern. And so, Mackenzie, I encourage you to keep working on the ya. Now, the reason we use ya, is because ya, the kicking it off with, and we do mostly years. We don't look at onsets, offset until Voice Essentials 2 and 3. In Voice Essentials 1, we only really work on balanced onset. Why? Because that's the most efficient, and that's kind of where we want our neutral point to be. And so we do that by kicking everything off with ya. You can hear where the sound, the vocal folds and the air are commencing simultaneously. This is why we call it simultaneous or balanced onset. Ya. And then if you want to explore the others, you can go and check those out for yourself in the course. So I would encourage you to keep working on the onsets and offsets. But Mackenzie, always remember that you still, as a contemporary singer, you are going to want to be able to use the other offsets and onsets at will, because they're going to be important stylistic tools for you. Ash Ackerman. Actually, I love my voice when I have a cold because my voice sounds husky, which I love. Is this a good thing? Unfortunately, Ash, no, it's not. Because when we have, I'm not saying that your husky voice doesn't sound aesthetically pleasing, but when we sing with a voice that is in that kind of conditioning, we are placing your vocal health at a significant risk. And the reason for that is when we have swollen vocal folds and there is swelling sort of within the larynx like that, the capillaries that are supplying blood into the cells and the various layers of the vocal folds, the capillaries are at higher risk of hemorrhaging. And so when we sing while we're sick, or we place the voice under load when we're sick, we are risking vocal fold hemorrhage first and foremost, and there are other things that can come about as a result of singing while sick as well. And this is why we always encourage singers to not sing while they're sick. I know, and you know, I was reminded again last week, I know how hard a decision it can be to not sing when you are sick. And sometimes, specifically when you are a professional singer, you're being expected to front up and, you know, sing for your supper, you're being paid to do the gig. Sometimes it's actually not possible to not sing, and so you have to manage your way through the gig. And there are other, you know, in fact we employ all of the measures that I was talking about before as a part of doing that. But where it is possible, even when it is difficult, like it was for me, it was not an easy decision to decide not to continue recording. Why? Because it actually required me to go, I mean, as you might expect, to get to do all of this with the show, I'm planned months in advance. And so I had to go through and rejig my entire schedule. It was not an easy thing to do. In some respects, it might have even been easier to just plow on and do the recording, but would have the risk is too high. Now, in the case of what I was doing, the risk, actually, there's one particular video which I've got coming up where I'm going to be showing you me singing some very high notes in full voice. So shortened and dominant, upper register. I think in one of the songs, in the song that I'm going to be showing you, I'm hitting a D5 and sustaining that. That's all I'll tell you. Obviously, hitting a D5 in full voice while I'm sick is not a good idea. And even if I had have got away with it from a health point of view, that is not blowing a vocal fold in the process, I said to Jody, my wife, I said, you know what, even if I do it and nothing goes wrong, and chances are that nothing would go wrong, then I don't think it's going to sound very good. So you've then got the issue of, you know, me then doing, you know, displaying something that I'm not overly proud of as far as the sound goes. So where we can make the decision to not do it, then that's always, not always the easiest, but it's typically the wisest course of action. And so, Ash, as far as your husky voice goes, it might well sound cool, but you're running the gauntlet, and so I would encourage you to be very careful. You know, one of the side benefits of my voice not being in great condition is I get to explore my lower notes, and you know, suddenly, because my vocal folds are fatter, they can go lower, and I get to explore the baritone colors that I've always dreamt of having, you know, as a habitual sound, but I'll never have because I am a tenor. Matt has asked, why is it easier to learn a foreign language by singing it than speaking it? I've noticed that I've learned a lot of Italian and other Latin languages, and Selena learned English that way. Well, one of the reasons being is because when, I'll speak to one reason, is because when you are singing in a foreign language, Matt, you may not be singing it with an actual knowledge of what you're actually saying. You're just creating sound. And whereas when you are talking it, you need to be able to, you know, be intentional in what you're saying, if that makes sense. And so that may be one of the reasons, is that you're not having to process the intent of what's being said. I mean, you should, you know, if you're singing in a language, if you remember, singing is not about perfect notes, it's about communication. So even if you're singing in a non-native language to yourself, you should still understand what you're saying, but nonetheless, a lot of the time we don't. Do you know, case in point, I think a lot of singers don't really even think about it when they're singing, you know, what are the lyrics actually saying when they're even singing in their own native language. So that's a discussion for another day. John, in fact, we've got 2 more questions, and then I think we'll call it a day, because I can feel my voice starting to get to the end. John, do you have any advice for more relaxed falsetto? Whenever I try, I can see my throat closes up when I look in the mirror, but can't get the notes without it. There's probably a number of things going on there, John. Firstly, actually, to sing falsetto, that is what we refer to as a CTA only activity. So the vocalis muscle, the thyroarytenoid muscle, has become quite passive, and the vocal folds have been, and the ligament have been stretched right out for you to achieve falsetto, and you're only bringing the top sort of portion of the vocal fold together, and they're oscillating because you're if you were to sing an A440 in falsetto, the vocal folds are oscillating quite quickly at 440 cycles per second. And so all of that then means that you're actually it's not really a relaxed activity at the surface of the vocal folds. It's actually, there's quite a bit of activity going on. What I think you're referring to is what's then happening supraglottically, that is above the vocal folds and then beyond through the vocal tract. And if you are finding yourself getting a lot of tension and tightness, then that may in part be driven by some breath management issues. And it's funny to think, isn't it, about breath management having an impact on here above the vocal tract, when we often think about breath management as that being which happens beneath the vocal folds. But in fact, your breath management then has a big impact on your tension management and vice versa. And so that's something that you would need to sort of explore a bit and be mindful of those things. One last question for Laura. How can I promote vocal cord closure? My voice dries out quickly when I sing falsetto as my cords don't close. Laura, firstly, there's a couple of questions I'd want to ask, and I won't ask for an answer now because we're going to finish up, but you need to think about your age. So if you're female and of the age of anywhere between 10 to even as late as 16, then vocal fold closure can be challenging, and we see often in the pubescent female voice a breathiness that can come in. We don't want the voice to stay there, but we can see a breathiness which is quite normal in the pubescent female voice. So that's the first thing. I'd want to look at your age and obviously gender. But then what we've got to look at is the manner in which, what has caused you to not have cord closure. If you're not of that particular age group and gender, then I'd want to talk about, okay, well, what has brought that about? Is the vocal fold, are the vocal folds having trouble bringing about closure because of too much subglottal pressure? Is there too much laryngeal tension, jaw tension? There's a whole range of things there. And so your question about falsetto, then we get back to the question that I just answered for John. So yeah, Laura, that would be there. I do have a video, Laura, on the channel about this very topic. I forget exactly what it's called. There's over 500 videos on the channel, and so you might want to go and explore the channel and look for more specific, and there's exercises on that video, if I'm remembering correctly, specific videos about that. So let me just go over here. Oh, yep, there we go. So there you go. Well, we actually hung, my voice lasted a little bit longer than I expected it to. It doesn't feel too bad actually, which is good, because I'm teaching again this week and the voice has to carry a little bit of load. But hopefully the discussion we had at the beginning of today's video was helpful in kind of giving you an insight into how is Dr. Dan looking after his own voice, having had a voice that was impacted by cold and flu like I did. If you found it helpful, hit the thumbs up button on today's video and let the YouTube gods know that it was a good video. Next week we've got Kerry Ho coming on from Songbird Tree is her label, and I'm really looking forward to that discussion, just simply because the joy with which Kerry approaches her singing and her teaching is just something that I just think is fabulous. So I'm wanting you to really get infected by that joy and be encouraged by it. So I hope you'll come and join me and Kerry next week when we hang out, as we do every Monday, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I hope you have a great week, everyone, and stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.